Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us this Friday noontime as we start off your weekend here live in downtown Providence. And as we do most Fridays, start the show with former state representative, former Deputy Secretary of State, now heads up Stages of Freedom, Ray Rickman, to give his big view.
Kate. When I was a child, I kept thinking one day the world will be perfect, particularly public school education. The world will get better. I was the lead plaintiff in 3 federal lawsuits, 1 state lawsuit, dealing with, I'll keep it simple, integrating the Detroit public schools. One of them, my favorite, lawsuits, and I probably was 16 years old enough to understand enough legalese and what was going on to be a serious plaintiff in this lawsuit. The other ones, the ACLU, the NAACP, whoever, they really were the leads, and I was the kid. I'm actually in the final stages of developing a play called The Civil Rights Kid. And I'm going to Bryant University in February to debut it, and then I'm going to Bristol Community College in March, and then on to Detroit in April. Those are the 3 rollouts. And in it, I'm the kid who brings the lawsuits against the big public school district of Detroit, powerful. And again, with my ACLU lawyers, it was really great stuff. We won every single case. So this is 50 years ago plus, and you'd think this all would be resolved. Favorite case involved black children were not permitted to be in the college track. There were 3 tracks: college, business, and general. And all the black students in Detroit were in general, meaning you get ready to go work in factory. That's what that was for. And they didn't care if you learned only the basics. Federal judge said this was discriminatory. They had a rule that black children could be in the college track if their parents had a college degree. I want you to think about that for a second. So you can't do anything your parents haven't done, and for black people to have a college degree pre-1960 was a tough road to be on. We won that federal. So I've been watching Detroit, in Providence. It's still going on in Detroit and all kinds of cities around America. The educational system is so bad. First, we can't deal with English preparation and teaching for Latino children. Now comes the issue of civics and this fabulous lawsuit. So I pick up the New York Times yesterday, and here it is, young woman at Career and Technical, lead plaintiff. They want to learn civics because only 23% of high school students know enough to know their 3 branches of government. Now, I think if we took the test out here on Westminster or Wybosset or Washington Street, or go down even to East Greenwich on Main Street and ask how many branches of government are there, how many members of Congress does Rhode Island have, how many U.S. senators, let's do an easy one, how many U.S. senators does each state have? Now let me repeat that, and I want you to answer to yourself the answers. How many senators does each state in America have? U.S. senators. How many congressmen does Rhode Island have? And I'm actually meaning congressmen because we have 4 men in these jobs at this point. Maybe one day it'll change. Are you with me? This fabulous lawsuit. I wish Ms. Cook well in the world. Any way that I can help, I'm willing. But I'd like you, take that little test, and then I'd like you to ask the governor of Rhode Island, what is she willing to do to put this in place and not fight it in a federal court? That's all. That's my big idea for the week. Ask the governor to, instead of using any of our state resources, any of her energy to fight this in any way, do the opposite. Have a conclave, invite Ms. Cook, the chief plaintiff, and 20, 30 people, and let's develop a civics program for the students of Rhode Island.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. We'd like to thank Ray Rickman for coming in to give his big view, and would like to thank a regular guest for coming on in, Pilar McLeod, with a sweet creation.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to have you back in because you're going to be taking part in a big panel discussion tomorrow at Brown University with their NAACP branch there. The Faces of Activism. Tell us a little bit about tomorrow's event.
So tomorrow's event is a panel discussion with some other local activists and or community leaders. Myself, I know Warren Carter is going to be there from the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence. Of course, former mayoral candidate Kobe Dennis will be there. I'm super excited, as well as myself. I'm not sure who else is on the panel. Those are the people that I know. And we're going to be talking about activism, both locally as well as nationally.
Because that pretty much encapsulates you. You're so active here in the community, but if you're not in Rhode Island, you were in a van with about 12 to 14 kids, going somewhere, bringing water to Flint. Wherever there's a need, you're out there in the community. Tell us a little bit, what's the story you're going to tell about Pilar, how you really got involved? Because I'm sure folks are going to ask the questions, really how you were called to this community service and this activism. Tell folks a little bit about the Pilar story.
Well, for me, activism or doing any form of community service work came when I moved here from New York, and 8 months into living here with no family, our house burned down. And I worked at the time Sovereign Bank, which is now Sandantier Bank, and people that I really didn't know came to our aid for not only me, myself, my mother, my son, my daughter, who were still in school, and it overwhelmed me. It was overwhelming, and I decided right then and there I needed to do something to give back, but I didn't know how. So I decided I was going to pay it forward or play it forward and start doing stuff in the community, and that's kind of how A Sweet Creation was birthed and born. And 12 and a half, almost 13 years later, we are still rocking and rolling on our grassroots nickel and dime operation. And then the thought became bigger. Why just do community service in Rhode Island? I live in Rhode Island, but really the community is anywhere where there is a need, at least for me. If you have the ability to lend your voice or lend your hand, then why not go and do it? And that, for me was what made me take kids to Flint. We went to Puerto Rico. Shout out to Puerto Rico. This summer, the kids stayed for a week. We did 2 organic farms in Abenito and Ponce that were affected by Hurricane Maria. We are gearing up because we're going to go back to Flint for our 3rd time.
Wow.
And it's
do you know when that's going to be?
Probably during the spring.
Okay.
We are working with the Jam Master Jay Foundation. Shout out to Venus Mazel in New York City to help give out toys to kids in the 5 boroughs and in other states for Christmas. So community services for me, wherever I can jump in, lend my hand, and let's bring those kids along and teach them that the community is a lot bigger than just where their zip code or area code is.
And that's, you know, you're always with the youth, and as you said, here in Rhode Island or throughout the country. I mean, how eye-opening are these experiences for these kids to get outside and to see other parts of the country? Because, you know, there's a lot of need here in Rhode Island, but as you said, the community is larger. I mean, what's it like to see their reactions when you go different places, especially if they've never been before? I mean, it's an education.
It is. It's an education that does not compare to what you can get in a book. It's easy to read about community service in a book. It's really easy to watch it in a movie. It's a lot different when you're hands-on. So those kids had amazing experiences because they had never been to Flint. So when they went to Flint, they were amazed and shocked at how the people were living, how water is so essential to our well-being. Same thing in Puerto Rico. They were amazed at how Puerto Rico, although devastated, had the resilience to rebuild themselves, and it is an amazing country, part of the U.S. territory. They were also amazed when we took them years ago down to Alabama when there was an oil spill crisis, and we helped down there with the oil spill, working in at the Back Bay Food Center for a whole week, boxing up food to families that didn't have food to eat in Bayou La Battery, Alabama. So it's amazing. The students journal. They have to write about their experiences, and it really teaches them a sense of pride. It's amazing to help somebody that you're never going to meet. At least to me, it is. And to the students, they say amazing things. They come back, so that means I must be doing something right, or they must like it. And you know, we have an amazing time when we go out of state. We have an amazing time in state, but something about when that sign says "Welcome to Connecticut."
Kids, they're ready to be back. I mean, you must be so heartened for the future, not only of the state and the country, when you see these young folks really roll up their sleeves and say, you know, we're not just going to sit back. We're gonna take charge. You know, we're gonna put our destiny in our hands and try to really affect change. You know, what do you hear from folks when they're like, "Oh, the kids today," but you see the best of the kids?
What I love the most about our young people and our millennials today is that they have resilience. So whereas us sometimes as grown-ups, we're a little hesitant, you know, we have to think about everything. I don't want to do it. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. These kids are like, I'm ruffling all the feathers, honey. I don't care who's mad, because at the end, it's their future.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, their future is our future. We're older. So whatever they do to make the difference, it's the trickle down. The difference isn't just for Kate and Pilar. The difference is for everybody. And that's what I like about them. They're not thinking about themselves. It's not selfish. They're thinking about everybody, nationwide, citywide, statewide, that is going to be affected by what it is they do. And I say, if you have the opportunity to get out and help these kids, support them, whether it's financially, a pat on the back, a word of encouragement, I say do it. Because if we're not going to do the work, then don't stop somebody else from trying to be the difference that we may not want to be. But I'm all about being the difference, honey. I say go out there and ruffle the feathers and get the job done by any means necessary.
And you do. You are, again, always boots on the ground. I mean, what do you expect the conversation to be like tomorrow with the different panelists and the students and the community at large? I mean, what do you expect from this conversation? It's at 3 o'clock tomorrow at Brown, the Metcalf Auditorium. We'll be sure to put that link up if it's something that, you know, you're energized.
And it's free.
You can come for this panel discussion. So what do you anticipate it being like?
I anticipate, well, from the 2 other people I know who are boots on the ground with me, Juan Carter and Kobe Dennis, I expect it's going to be real energetic, a lot of jokes. And Juan Carter and Mr. Dennis and I, we've all protested. Juan Carter and I have marched outside of the state of Rhode Island with our young people, and that's totally different than when we march and protest in state. It's different when you're marching in DC. It's different when you're marching in New York City. It's different when you're in Richmond, Virginia. You get a different kind of energy. The people are they're really passionate about what it is we're doing as a collective to make the difference. And I think that energy is going to come in tomorrow. Because I know I'm bringing the thunder, honey. You better be prepared.
Pilar will definitely be bringing the energy. And after tomorrow, let's look ahead to the new year. There is an exhibit taking place this February that we're just going to let folks know about now, give you some heads up as to what's going to take place in February.
Well, actually, the exhibit is going on now until February 10th of 2019.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's going on now. It's going on now.
Well, tell us a little bit more.
So the exhibit it's a catalog piece. It's put on at the
Get a little closer over here.
Benefit House, I believe.
We'll put all the information
Carriage
up.
House over at 357 Benefit Street. It's again through Brown University, and I am in the catalog. I've completed a written piece about youth, young people, activism, social justice, civil rights, and it's a display of the voices of activism, kind of like through the ages and the modern day, how it compares. Because when you look through the ages, or if you look back from the 50s and the 60s, the same things we protested about then, some of them are the same things we're protesting about now.
And does that, you know, as we're here in 2018, does that surprise you at all as to where we are and where the country is in this day and age?
Actually, it does, because I was born in the 70s, so by the time I was born, everybody had protested and everybody had kumbaya and kind of saying we had overcome. And then now to see the current administration, and when I mean administration, I mean presidential administration, kind of try to take back everything that has been set forth. And it all seems to affect minorities, people of black and brown persuasion, females, young kids. I'm not understanding it, because I don't understand why the premises or the perception seems to be, I got mine and I'm going to keep mine and I don't want anybody else to get theirs. If this is the land of the free, home of the brave, we are supposed to be equal. How come we are not treated equal? And if we are not going to have a hard look again at racism and how it plays out amongst minorities, then we are not sitting at the table and having an open and honest discussion. We keep claiming that we do, because everything comes back to race. I don't care what you say. In every genre, that's where it is. Education, healthcare, housing, work, everything. So if we're not going to have the real conversation and make 45 accountable for his actions and push back as much on not only nationally but locally on our local politicians when they may do or say things that are not going to benefit the community, the city, the state at large, then we are wasting our time, ladies and gentlemen. I say we had the right to vote. People fought, bled, and died so that we can do it. Stand up and have your voice be heard. And if you're not going to stand up, move over, honey, because mother is coming.
Pilar McLeod, I appreciate you taking the time to come in, because I know you're busy leading up to tomorrow's event, and we'll provide links if you can't make it tomorrow. Yes. You can see this Faces of Activism display that Brown, in conjunction with the NAACP and leaders in the community, has here in Providence. So Pilar McLeod,
thank you so much. And one shameless plug, the Boys and Girls Club Sunday is having an indoor bazaar, Southside Boys and Girls Club. Come on through, get your little Christmas nicks and knacks, and see Mother P, because Big Mama P is definitely going to be there, honey.
We'll be sure to put a plug in for that too if you are going to be watching this after the fact. So again, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
And don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back here with our next guest in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome our next guest, who's been in the news quite a bit the last couple of days here. Jennifer Wood, the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Center for Justice. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Kate.
Well, I appreciate it, because this is really big news, not just here in Rhode Island, but nationally. This was the federal lawsuit filed yesterday looking to guarantee the right for students to a civic education, to an adequate education. So bring us through this. You know, we've heard folks maybe talk about this a little bit before, but now we've seen you take action. So how did the Center for Justice get involved and really go through the motions to say, here's what we're going to file in court?
Over the past year, we've held discussions all around Rhode Island, actually, with a lot of education advocacy groups, parents and students. Professor Mike Rebell from Teachers College at Columbia University had come to the state and really posed the question of, were we ready to bring a challenge in federal court a challenge that will have national implications about whether or not children in fact have a constitutional right to an adequate education that enables them to participate in democratic institutions. We believe that the U.S. Constitution protects that right. In Rhode Island, there have been 2 cases brought in the state Supreme Court under the Rhode Island Constitution. And one of the reasons this case is happening in Rhode Island is that our state Supreme Court has said only the General Assembly in Rhode Island can decide how much education is adequate under the state constitution. So we have to look to our U.S. Constitution to improve public education in Rhode Island.
And impacting public education in Rhode Island with this being a federal lawsuit, would it apply just to Rhode Island or would it apply nationally?
If the federal district court in Rhode Island determines that, as we believe is the case, there is a federally protected right, then that will be a federal and national impact. It can be challenged. There are cases going on in other states, and they may work their way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but ultimately it will have a federal impact. It will have a national impact.
And at the crux of it, as you talk about this civic education, to prepare the students to be able to be civic participants, does it really come down to simply civic education within the classroom, or is it broader than that?
No, I really want to emphasize that this is about young people's constitutional right to vote, the right to have access to our jury system, the right to participate in their First Amendment right to free expression, to right to assembly and petition the government. Unless young people are prepared in school to undertake those activities, they literally are being denied those enumerated constitutional rights. I think the most concrete example I can give you is jury duty. I'm sure you've gotten that card in the mail. I have as well. When you open that package that says, we're summoning you to come and be on a jury, you have to answer a series of questions, name, address, etc. One of the questions is, can you read and write in English? And in Rhode Island, we know that our English language learner students, many of them are not being well served. This has been much reported in the news. We've been ranked on some scales the last nationally in terms of that equity gap for our students. If you can't answer that question on the jury card, yes, I can read and write in English, even though you may have been born in this country, even though you may have been in a monolingual household as a young child, if you haven't gotten those skills through the public education system, you're frozen out of the jury system.
So let's talk a little bit about that, addressing that education. So looking for that constitutional protection, if you will. Does the suit, are you involved with looking as to how that looks, or are you simply looking from the court level to mandate this and then have the states or Rhode Island adhere to what they dictate?
So, as with so many things, it's both very simple and very complicated. Here's the simple part. The simple part is that we're asking the federal court to look at all the previous U.S. Supreme Court law in this area, to look at the question we've presented, and answer the question of whether or not children have a constitutionally protected right to an education that is adequate to prepare them to participate in democratic institutions. We believe that right exists. If the court says yes, it does, then the second part of the case is that right being met? Are young people in Rhode Island being prepared adequately to participate in voting, on juries, to exercise their rights to free speech?
So that's the part two, is that goes through the courts and then the examination.
If there's a right and it's being fulfilled, well then great. We believe, and we've mounted 47 pages of evidence in a complaint that suggests that that is not being met. So then, if the court were to determine that there is a right, it's not being fulfilled, then the case comes back outside the realm of the judicial system, into the realm of the community and the political system. What amount of education would be sufficient? How would we as a state organize ourselves around public education to deliver a quality public education that fulfills those needs?
And is that sort of getting the cart ahead of the horse to think about what that would even look like? I mean, you must be, I don't want to say myopically focused on the legal portion of it right now, but as you said, bringing the community together, it sounds like that would be a pretty large undertaking.
So actually, we're trying to run alongside the court.
Okay, dual path.
We're proceeding on two paths here. We've filed Wednesday night a case in federal court, and we intend to, of course, proceed very vigorously in that litigation. But we shouldn't wait until we get that answer. We intend to hold forums around the state asking Rhode Islanders, what would you like to see improved about your public education system? Do your kids know what they need to know to vote, to sit on a jury, to exercise their right to free speech, to participate in government? Most of the parents that we ask that question to say no. They do not have those skills. They don't know what they need to know. And then the next question is, well, then what should we change? And we're going to be doing that over the next year and a half, regardless of the outcome of this litigation, but in support of the litigation, because if we do prevail, and we expect that we will,
then you're ready to go.
We will be ready to have some community consensus around what really needs to be altered in our education system.
And wasn't just adults at the table yesterday when you had the press conference, again, filed late Friday night, but you had the youth there as well. And they were really the ones who said and affirmed these, assertions that you're making about how the schools are not preparing them.
Actually, the most inspiring part of this case for me as an attorney is representing these young people who have stepped up and stood up to say, I'm not prepared to participate in the democratic institutions of our country. I have not really gotten what I needed out of my public education to be ready. First of all, that's a huge admission.
Yeah.
I mean, for young people to actually raise their hand and say, you know what, I don't know what I need to know. I'd like to learn more. And Alita, who was one of the two young people who was at the press conference yesterday, was very clear. She said, I'm doing this for my little brothers. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm a senior in high school. I'm going to have to find my path. But while I'm still in school, I can stand up for them. We have plaintiffs in this case from the age of 3 weeks to senior in high school. And all of those children, either obviously our 3-week-old is represented by his parent in this case.
How many plaintiffs are there?
There are 14 young people.
Okay.
And they represent, it's a class action, so they represent all similarly situated public school students in the state.
So here you are talking about going on this dual track. It was filed on Wednesday evening. It's sort of hard to tell, I'm sure, how fast the wheels of justice and the process moves. I mean, what do you expect now moving forward, especially on the legal side?
Sure. Well, we know how the court system works. Basically, within the next 30 to 60 days, roughly, the defendants in the case, and the case is brought against all of the elected officials who have a role to play in setting education policy in the state. So basically, we've got the Senate President, we've got the Speaker of the House, the Governor, and the Education Commissioner, as well as the two boards, the Board of Education and the Council on Elementary and Secondary Education. Those are the named defendants. These people are not being sued as individuals. This is a systemic and structural issue. We're not saying that any one person created this problem, nor are we saying that the sitting officials created this problem. This problem has been decades in the making, and we're saying that we have got to really make a bold move now to make structural change in our education system.
And as we talked about, been getting a lot of attention for this in national press as well. Has anything surprised you in the reaction to this so far? Or have you just been getting calls by folks saying, wow, I can't believe you're doing this? Actually,
I've been so heartened because we knew that democratic participation is not a partisan issue. It's not an ideological issue. It's an American issue. It's fundamental to sustaining a healthy democracy that young people are prepared to participate in that democracy. And we're at a point in our nation where very few people have the skills and desire to have a civil conversation with people who are vehemently thinking differently than themselves. And we know that this next generation needs that preparation because there's plenty to argue about. But we need to be able to do it civilly and to bring evidence to our propositions and to agree to disagree at times.
So moving forward, would you say that you are going to encourage all Rhode Islanders to participate in this process as you have these forums, parents, students, generally interested community members to really turn out to have their voice heard?
Yes, we're going to be announcing forums to be held all around the state. We're working with educators, families, education advocacy organizations, a lot of the youth-serving organizations that fill the gap that is not currently being filled in public education are working with us to plan these and make sure that community voice is heard. It's not up to a small group of lawyers to decide what our public education system should look like. A judge is going to tell us what our rights are. We have a definite position about that and have articulated it, I think, clearly in the case. But we as a community have to decide what education system would be adequate to really prepare our young people, not just with literacy and numeracy, although that is necessary but not sufficient, but really what do people need to know in order to be active, robust participants in our democracy.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come in and talk with us a little bit here in studio. We'll be sure to be letting the folks know who are watching right now when these forums occur and any updates about this suit moving forward.
Great, thank you, Kate.
Jennifer Wood, thank you so much.
Great to see you.
Appreciate you tuning in for today's noontime show here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. That wraps us up for today. We'll be back here on Monday with Josh Fenton with Small Biz Fuel and Business Monday. But of course, check in with GoLocalProv.com and find us on Facebook throughout the weekend. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.